Okay, so chapter 37, he says in verse 1, "At this also my heart trembles and leaps from its place. Hear attentively the thunder of his voice and the rumbling that comes from his mouth. He sends it forth under the whole heaven, his lightning to the ends of the earth. After a voice roars, he thunders with his majestic voice. He does not restrain them when his voice is heard." Now, what he's going to say here is actually very similar sounding to what some of the things that God's going to say. He's talking about the nature of God as seen in the creation of God. And you remember what he's been saying all this time is that Job's problem is not that it's not a matter of whether he was right or wrong or righteous or unrighteous. Mainly his problem is that he's trying to discredit God so that he can be credited, so that he can be seen as righteous. And there is some legitimacy to that. I don't think that was his intention, but Job's words could be easily seen that way. And so Elihu's response has been, this is what you're doing, but you need to remember who God is. Now remember, we've had several chapters where he's gone on about the majesty of God and the greatness of God and how he can't do anything, that Job can't do anything to change who God is or affect him in any way. So he understands that too, but it's good to see that Elihu is bringing this out. And so we have here awe in the natural reaction. As the natural reaction, we consider what God has done in his creation. That's the first few verses here. And in verse 5, it says that God thunders marvelously with his voice. He does great things which we cannot comprehend. And that's really the main point of this whole chapter, is that God does great things that we can't comprehend. And if God behaves that way, then it makes sense that we won't be able to comprehend even the things that Job is going through too. It would follow, which is really a great thing to say. His friends, I think, sometimes said that, but it was so couched in their attacks against Job, it really didn't come out. Job has said the same thing too, but it is good. He's trying to have a balance here and to say that God is so far above us, what could we possibly know or do? And verses 6 through 10, he goes in here, he talks about winter and how it shows God's power and wisdom. He says, "For he says to the snow, fall on the earth, likewise to the gentle rain, the heavy rain of his strength. He seals the hand of every man, that all men may know his work." Now, sealing the hand means that he stopped them from doing the work because of the weather. The beasts go into dens and remain in their lairs. From the chamber of the south comes the whirlwind, and cold from the scattering winds of the north. By the breath of God, ice is given, and the broad waters are frozen. Also with moisture, he saturates the thick clouds. He scatters his bright clouds. So the winter shows his power and wisdom. It's possible verses 11 through 13 could be talking about summer, because he says, with moisture, he saturates the thick clouds. He scatters his bright clouds. The footnote here on that, what does it say? Oh, clouds of light. I guess maybe lightning would be in there, part of that. And they swirl about, being turned by his guidance, that they may do whatever he commands them on the face of the whole earth. He causes it to come, whether for correction or for his land or for mercy. So here, this is a good observation for him to say this. What are the reasons that God brings about this weather? He says 3 things: for correction, for his land, meaning the land needs the moisture, so he brings it, or for mercy. So he's bringing water when people have been without it for a long time. So he recognizes that there's more than one reason that things could happen. Maybe this is a sign that he actually believes that there's more to this story than possibly his friends are saying. I don't know for sure, but he does bring that up, that there are alternate reasons. And we could actually probably even add a number 4 maybe, and that would be chance. Some things just happen by chance, right? The way God has arranged things, weather patterns exist, and sometimes things happen. I'm not saying that God is not in control. He can change things if he wants to, but that is a possibility at least. It's more than just punishment. Then 14 through 18, he talks about balance. He says, "Listen to this, O Job, stand still and consider the wondrous works of God. Do you not know when God dispatches them and causes the light of his clouds to shine? Do you know how the clouds are balanced, those wonderful works of him who is perfect in knowledge? So why are your garments hot when he quiets the earth by the south wind? With him have you spread out the skies, strong as a cast metal mirror? So the idea of balance here is that God has perfectly arranged things so that there's a proper balance to things, and that's where the cycles come from, and that kind of thing. Is showing again the wisdom of God. And the question here is similar to what God says to him. Were you there? Right? Were you the one who did this? Were you able to do this with him? When he says, with him have you spread out the skies? So were you there with him spreading out the skies when he did this? And it's a great question. When he says also here, this is an interesting passage, in 18, strong as a cast metal mirror. Does anyone have anything different? That's the end of verse 18. Molten mirror, okay? That's the idea, is molten metal that you can be a mirror that was made for that. The ancients thought that the upper atmosphere was solid, and something had to hold up the stars. So it was solid. It was holding up stars that way. But this probably is referring to the reflective qualities of the atmosphere. The original language says mirror, but remember, that's not the same thing as we would think of as a mirror. They use polished bronze. That's why they call it metal. So they inserted the word metal there for clarity. Or molten, same idea. It's there to help us understand. A reminder, it's not glass he's talking about. It's not a perfect mirror. It's just reflection. But it's still interesting, and it could be that he's talking about the myth, the legend of what the sky is, or the reflective properties of it. We're not exactly sure what he was talking about. Molten looking glass. Okay. Yeah, and but it wouldn't have been glass, so they had to put molten in there, I guess, for metal, the idea of metal. So, yeah. How do you translate mirror? Because mirror automatically means glass to us, right? So you have to put something else in there to make it work. And then 19 through 24 basically mean is what could we begin to say about a being like God? What he says here. Teach us what we should say to him, for we can prepare nothing because of the darkness. Should he be told that I wish to speak? If a man were to speak, surely he would be swallowed up. Even now, men cannot look at the light when it is bright in the skies, when the wind has passed and cleared them. He comes from the north as golden splendor, with God as awesome majesty. As for the Almighty, we cannot find him. He is excellent in power and judgment and abundant in mercy. He does not oppress, therefore men fear him. He shows no partiality to any who are wise of heart. Okay? So I would say he doesn't show partiality to anyone, whether they're wise or fools, but he's trying to give God credit for the majesty and the strength, and the obvious implication here is, he says in verse 20, should he be told that I wish to speak? If a man were to speak, surely he would be swallowed up. Obviously, he's referring to what Job was saying earlier. If I could just have an opportunity to speak to him, I can find out what's going on. I can understand. He can explain to me, or he can change things. Maybe he went through a stage where he thought maybe God's unaware, he's not paying attention. And so I can bring it to his attention. There are a lot of reasons that several reasons that he said he wanted to speak to him. And then remember, he changed from talking about how he wanted to see God right now to how he recognizes that he will see God one day. And he's looking forward to that day, so that, in fact, he was calling on the earth to be a witness of the sufferings that he endured. So when he stood before God, there would be a witness to corroborate what he was saying. That these things actually happened, but he trusted that God would make everything right in the end, which is pretty amazing in itself. So anyway, that brings us to the end of the chapter, and we did go through that pretty quickly, but is there anything in there that stands out that you want to discuss that would be part of this discussion? What is your impression of Elihu's words compared to Job's or compared to the friends? He sounds a lot more mature than his age would you would think from his age. I would say even he may be a little more mature than the old men that were there, right? Just the very fact that he would actually listen to Job that says a lot, right? Isaac, do you have anything to add? You kept saying to me many times how you really loved Elihu. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but do you have anything to add to that? Well, I could be wrong. I'm not saying I'm right about it, but so you're saying that now there has been some correction. Yeah, certainly there has been some correction. I think some of it was unwarranted, but remember, I've even said that from his perspective, it's easy to see why he would think Job was doing that. So yeah, I mean, I do agree with you to a degree. So he's straightening Job out, in your opinion. Okay. Yeah, I can appreciate that. It's pretty obvious that he did a better job than his friends did. Yeah. He's more balanced. Yeah. I definitely get that. In fact, I think he maybe even more balanced than Job, because that could be some of the correction. Because Job was so concerned about his righteousness and he is right, that he didn't, sometimes he went so far as to say, it was like casting aspersions on God, because look at what he's done to me. Even though I don't know if he intended that, but that's certainly what came out. That he what? He did, yeah, there were a few things that he said that were an echo of his friends, like accusing him of guilt, but it wasn't very much, and it wasn't nearly to the extreme. Say that again. Oh, something for this whole time, or something even previous to this? What you're saying? Yeah. My impression, he's talking about the whole time, but it's hard to tell for sure, because he's been listening this whole time, and he's kind of gathered his thoughts about what Job has been. And I do believe he's kind of serving as a middle ground. Now he's bringing Job, at least he's bringing out some things for us, because what's about to happen is Job's going to be corrected, and there's no question about that. And so maybe it's kind of a stepping process, as you could look at it that way. And maybe the balance that Elihu is bringing to that is going to help Job accept what God says more. Yeah. Elihu not being mentioned. I don't remember if he was mentioned. I don't think he was. I would assume that would be because he didn't abuse Job. He was more balanced. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. All right, good thinking, good thoughts. Anything else? You what? No, you're fine. You're fine. All right, so moving into Job 38, this is where this gives me chills. This part, it says, the Lord answered Job out of a whirlwind. What do we know about the whirlwind? Have you seen it before? true, but I was thinking about Job's children. Weren't they killed by whirlwind? I'm not saying it was God. I'm just saying this is a word that it's not a dirt devil. Okay, this is a word that you could actually use to translate hurricane. This is a massive, huge thing. It's not, I remember seeing pictures growing up of like Job, and there's like a little dirt devil kind of thing. You remember those cartoons of the dirt devil and had a cowboy hat on? I don't know why I remember that, but that's kind of the way it was in my thinking. But this is actually, if this is a tornado, we're talking about an F5. This is a absolutely massive thing. It could be even described as a hurricane. This is who he is, and so this is serious, serious business. Job lost his children in a great wind, and now God comes in an even greater wind. In that, the word here describing is greater than the one that was lost his children to. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think there's a great show of power here for a reason. And the words here, who is this who darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Now prepare yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. That gives me chills to think about God saying that to me, right? That's a pretty good. And then, but coming from the whirlwind itself, this is God didn't appear in form of a man or as a quiet whisper. What more power and volume can you present than this kind of thing, like a hurricane? There's nothing else more powerful on earth. And so this is how he presents himself. And the question is, who darkens counsel by words without knowledge? So in other words, all this stuff you're saying, Job, you're just making you're just hurting words. You're hurting counsel just because you don't know anything. And he says, so he goes into the questions. And I think that verses 2 and 3 are some of the most frightening and sobering words in the Bible, just considering the context of it. It's amazing. 4 through 7, he talks about the creation of the earth. 8 through 18, he talks about the sea. 19 through 21, he talks about the light. 22 through 30, he talks about meteorology. 31 through 33, he talks about constellations and natural forces on earth. 34 through 38, he talks about thunder and lightning and rain. And 39 through 41, he talks about his care for creation. And those are just categories of things that he's asking Job about. So think about that, how he's kind of organized it, and he's going from bigger to smaller as he goes through this. And he says, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? To what were its foundations fastened? Or who laid its cornerstone when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? That's an interesting phrase, interesting verse. To what were its foundations fastened? Foundations of what? The earth. What were the foundations fastened? Or the foundations of the earth fastened to? Nothing, right? But he doesn't know that. He doesn't know even how to answer that. And who laid its cornerstone? And then look at that when the morning stars sang together. When would that have been? What are the morning stars? Any idea? This is a reference to creation. So when did he create the stars? Pretty much the same time as the earth, right? God created the heavens and the earth. So the morning stars began to sing. You know, stars have volume. They don't sing, but they have noise. They make noise. I saw yesterday a thing on Instagram. It was a pic. Have you ever seen that picture? I think it's called the Andromeda. I don't know what it's called. Way out in space, and it looks like an eyeball. Have you seen that before? They converted the light waves to sound. It was freaky. It was weird. But all the not all the planets, all the stars actually make noise. They can register And so that's one of the things you can pick up. Do you have?
I heard the take those and put those sound waves together.
You make music with it. Oh, yeah, see, that would be incredible. That's what he's talking about. He calls it all the sons of God shouted for joy. That is either a reference, I think it's a reference to the morning stars because it's Hebrew parallelism. Some people believe it's a reference to angels when he created angels too. They were created shouting for joy. Or maybe they were shouting for joy because the creation was so incredible, which would have been part of that too. And whatever it means, that there's a lot of celebration that's going on. And even the morning stars are all singing because why? Because God is doing something absolutely incredibly awesome. Right? He's created everything. And then the sea, who shut in the sea with doors when it burst forth and issued from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment, and thick darkness its swaddling band, when I mixed my limit for it, and set bars and doors, when I said, this far you may come, but no farther, and here your proud waves must stop. There's a reference to not only to the beginning when the earth was covered with water, but then he created boundaries. What's the boundaries? The land, right? And it doesn't matter how much the water beats against the land, it can erode and all kinds of things, but it's not going to go any further, right? It has its limits. And God is the one who put them there, and he made it so that it would be that way. Let's see here. In verse 12, have you commanded the morning since your days began and caused the dawn to know its place, that it might take hold of the ends of the earth, and the wicked be shaken out of it? It takes on form like clay under a seal, and stands out like a garment. From the wicked, their light is withheld, and the upraised arm is broken. Again, talking about the life that is coming because of the creation. And he says, have you entered the springs of the sea, or have you walked in search of the depths? Now, this is actually a passage that a man, I can't remember how long ago it was. He predicted that we would find springs in the ocean. And that's exactly what we see. How did he possibly know that? Job. Well, that's because this is coming from God. And so he, let's see here, where was I at? 17, have the gates of death been revealed to you, or have you seen the doors of the shadow of death? Have you comprehended the breadth of the earth? Tell me if you know all this. Where is the way to the dwelling of light? In darkness, where is its place? That you may take it to its territory, that you may know the paths to its home. Do you know it because you were born then, or because the number of your days is great? Okay, so what is the implication of all these questions he's asking? Were you there? Were you there? Why does it matter if he was there or not? Let you know who's in control. You're this old, and I am infinite old. I think God would have a lot more understanding than Job, and that's his point. You have no idea what you're talking about. He says in verse 22, have you entered the treasury of snow, or have you seen the treasury of hell, which I have reserved for time of trouble, for the day of battle and war? By what way is light diffused, or the east wind scattered over the earth? Who has divided a channel for the overflowing of water, or a path for the thunderbolt? These are things that you can verify scientifically too, especially the path for the thunderbolt. Have you ever seen a picture of lightning before, right as it's striking? They're actually little arms that go up from the earth. They actually go up, and for all kinds of places, and the tops of things. And lightning also comes down, and when it meets one of those it actually strikes from the bottom up. It's amazing. So there's a path that's outlined before it actually strikes. So he's talking about that here. We didn't have any idea of that until we had photography that was fast enough to take those kind of pictures. Verse 26, to cause it to rain on a land where there is no one, a wilderness in which there is no man. That's an interesting thought too. It was brought up before by one of the other men, one of the friends, about how that God will water the land even if it doesn't benefit humanity. There doesn't seem to be a benefit, but we are not the only ones here, right? There's a whole lot more going on than just us. Verse 27, to satisfy the desolate waste, to cause to spring forth the growth of tender grass. Has the rain a father, or who has begotten the drops of dew? Well, have you ever heard of cloud seeding? There is a father to rain. There is a seed to rain. That's maybe a reference to what he's talking about. From whose womb comes the ice, and the frost of heaven, who gives it birth? The waters harden like stone, the surface of the deep is frozen. Can you bind the cluster of the Pleiades, or loose the belt of Orion? Can you bring out Mazzaroth in its season, or can you guide the great bear with its cubs? Do you know the ordinances of the heavens? Can you set their dominion over the earth? Can you lift up your voice to the clouds, and an abundance of water may cover you? Can you send out lightnings that they may go and say to you, here we are? Who has put wisdom in the mind? Who has given understanding to the heart? Well, that's a deep one up there. How is it even possible that we can think the way that we do? It's only God. So that's a direct statement against Job, right? You can't even consider me, except the fact that I gave you the ability, and you're gonna lecture me about how I'm running things, right? Amazing. Let's see. Verse 37. Who can number the clouds by wisdom? Who can pour out the bottles of heaven when the dust hardens in clumps and the clods cling together? Can you hunt the prey for the lion, or satisfy the appetite of the young lions when they crouch in their dens or lurk in their lairs to lie in wait? Who provides food for the raven when its young ones cry to God and wander about for lack of food? All these things are evidence of God's wisdom and ability, and not only that, but his interaction. The implication here is very easily seen that God is in control of everything that happens. He knows exactly what's happening. He knows how to make things happen. And he's not just sitting back doing nothing. He's actually active in this world. He's not passive. There are a lot of people that today, I think, in the church, I would say a lot. There's some people I've run into that they actually describe it as God winding the earth up and setting it aside and watching things happen. Now, there's a certain degree in which things do happen simply because of the natural course of things, but that doesn't mean that he's not actively a participant in those things. In fact, the book of Hebrews says that it's by the word of God that all things consist and exist. And so he is, just by his power, the power of his word, these things are continuing on exactly as he has said that they would. Okay, so 39, he continues on with this line of reasoning and questioning. You know the time when the wild mountain goats bear young, or can you mark when the deer gives birth? Can you number the months that they fulfill, or do you know the time when they bear young? There's actually certain species, and maybe it's all of them, I don't know, certain species of goats, I believe it's either goat or deer, that they always have children at the same time every year. And what I was told, it's the same day. I don't know if it's exactly, if it's that exact, but that could be some of the things he's talking about. Verse 3, they bow down, they bring forth their young, they deliver their offspring. The young ones are healthy, they grow strong with grain. They depart and do not return to them. Who set the wild donkey free? Who loosed the bonds of the onager? Whose home I have made in the wilderness, and the barren land his dwelling? He scorns the tumults of the city. He does not need to heed the shouts of the driver. The range of the mountains is his pasture, and he searches after every green thing. Will the wild ox be willing to serve you? Will he bed by your manger? Can you bind the wild ox in a furrow with ropes? Or will he plow the valleys behind you? Will you trust him because his strength is great, or will you leave your labor to him? Will you trust him to bring home your grain and gather it to your threshing floor? The implication, obviously, is that God can, that he knows exactly how to control these things, everything about it. 13, the wings of the ostrich have waved proudly, but her wings and pinions like the county stork. are her wings and pinions like a county stork. For she leaves her eggs on the ground and warms them in the dust. She forgets that a foot may crush them or wild beasts may break them. She treats her young harshly as though they were not hers. Her labor is in vain without concern. Because God deprived her of wisdom and did not endow her with understanding. When she lifts herself on high, she scorns the horse and its rider. So in our perspective, they don't behave anything like we would think, but God still takes care of them. Have you given the horse strength? Have you clothed his neck with thunder? Can you frighten him with a locust? His majestic snorting strikes terror. He paws in the valley and rejoices in his strength. He gallops into the clash of arms. He mocks at fear and is not frightened, nor does he turn back from the sword. The quiver rattles against him, the glittering spear and javelin. He devours the distance with fierceness and rage. Nor does he come to a halt because the trumpet has sounded. At the blast of the trumpet, he says, "Aha!" He smells the battle from afar, the thunder of captains and shouting. Again, talking about the majesty of the beasts that God has created. Does the hawk fly by your wisdom and spread its wings toward the south? Does the eagle mount up at your command and make its nest high? On the rock it dwells and resides, on the crag of the rock and the stronghold. From there it spies out the prey. Its eyes observe from afar. Its young ones suck up blood. And where the slain are, there it is. Hawk, eagle, vulture, kind of all in the same kind of category for that word. Verse 40. Anyone have any comments? Okay. Chapter 40. Oh, the Lord answered Job and said, "Shall the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? He who rebukes God, let him answer it." And Job answered the Lord and said, "Behold, I am vile. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand over my mouth. Once I have spoken, but I will not answer. Yes, twice, but I will proceed no further." Verses 1 and 2 basically are saying, if you can answer the questions that I've asked you, then maybe you have the right to say something to me. But he couldn't answer any of those things. And so Job is humbled. He was humbled before because he said, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away, right? Blessed be the name of the Lord from the very beginning. But he's kind of gone a little too far with this. And he needed to be brought down a peg, I guess you'd say. But seeing how his questions could indicate that he thinks God was treating him unfairly, he decided he needs to back off. He is at least understanding that he should trust God enough to accept his circumstances without needing any answers. So he doesn't have any more answers anymore that he wants, right? Remember, this whole time he's been saying, if I just see God's face, if I just see him, if I have the opportunity to talk to him, I will bring up all these things. And now he has the opportunity to talk to God, and what does he say? I'm vile, I have nothing to offer you, I have nothing to say to you. He has no need anymore for any answers. Why? He recognizes that God is in control. And if he already believes in the majesty and the justice of God, which he did, and he sees the power of God on top of that, then he has to take rest in the fact that he is God. And what could we possibly say? I don't say that in the sense of like, well, we're just downbeat and there's nothing we can say against it. It's more than that. It's not that at all. It's the fact that we have a God who is righteous and holy and incredibly powerful and awesome. There's nothing that we have to offer him, and there's no reason to think that we could ever bring something to his attention. It's foolish to think that we could bring something to his attention that he wasn't aware of. He knows everything. He's got it all figured out. So it's a very powerful message, but God's not finished with him. He goes on to talk about his power and judgment. He says, the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, now prepare yourself like a man. I will question you, and you will answer me. So now that Job said, I don't want anything to do with it, he said, no, you're not getting off the hook. You're going to give me some answers. Would you indeed annul my judgment? Would you condemn me that you may be justified? So this is kind of what Elihu was saying. Have you an arm like God, or can you thunder with a voice like his? Then adorn yourself with majesty and splendor and array yourself with glory and beauty. That's another verse to me that is one of the most powerful verses in this book. Going back also again to what he said the first time he said this. But he says, adorn yourself with majesty and splendor and array yourself with glory and beauty. How in the world could you possibly do that? Right? How could you, what would you do to array yourself as a being of power compared to God? It's ridiculous to think that. So this is Elihu. I mean, this is some of the things that Elihu was saying, but he says in verse 11, go ahead, Job, disperse your wrath. Let everyone see just how mighty you are. It's laughable. He says that in verse 11, disperse your rage, the rage of your wrath. Look on everyone who is proud and humble them. Look on everyone who is proud and bring him low. Tread down the wicked in their place. Hide them in the dust together. Bind their faces in hidden darkness. Then I will also confess to you that your own right hand can save you. Hide them in the dust together. Bind their faces in hidden darkness. Then I will confess to you that your own right hand will save you. Obviously, it's obviously very important. If I will confess to you that you can save yourself, that you can't, because he knows none of that can happen. Then it goes into the behemoth. And this is another example of God's power. This chapter is really about his power. All of it is. Previously was about his wisdom, but this is more about his power. He says, look now at the behemoth, which I made along with you. He eats grass like an ox. See now his strength is in his hips and his power is in his stomach muscles. By the way, did you notice what he said in verse 15? Which I made along with you? What is that a reference to? What does it mean by that? He made it at the same time as man. So this animal was something that was made with man, same day. His strength is in his hips. He moves like, in verse 17, he moves his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are tightly knit. His bones are like beams of bronze. His ribs like bars of iron. He is the first of the ways of God. Only he who made him can bring near his sword. First to the ways of God means that this is the highest of his creation related to the power that's exhibited here. The first of his creation. Surely the mountains yield food for him, and all the beasts of the field play there. He lies under the lotus tree in a covert of reeds and marsh. The lotus trees cover him with their shade. The willows by the brook surround him. Indeed, the river may rage, yet he is not disturbed. He is confident, though the Jordan gushes into his mouth, though he takes it in his eyes, or one pierces his nose with a snare. Okay, so behemoth means great beast. And that's the only thing we can know about it for sure. Some people have said, well, this is an elephant. And that's just not even close. Verse 17 says he moves his tail like a cedar. I've never seen an elephant with a massive tail. A cedar would have been a huge tree. Yeah, not a little sprig. It's a tree. So this is massive, whatever it was. It was some kind of a dinosaur. They didn't call them dinosaurs. That term wasn't phrased until the 1800s. But there's no way you can see this kind of description and not think that. It was something massive. And by the way, he said it was created the same time Job was. Or not Job, humanity, excuse me. Some people say that it's a mythological creature. I don't buy that at all, because this whole time he's talking about things that Job can witness with his own eyes as evidence of God's power and wisdom. And he wouldn't bring up something mythical to prove his power and wisdom. That wouldn't even make sense. So it wouldn't fit. And then really the only thing that really fits there is the idea of a dinosaur, what we call a dinosaur. So supposedly in that region, this represented evil. Some people have said that. Some people have said that this is a hippo. Some said elephant, some say hippo, because the hippopotamus in that region represented evil. I don't even know how they could know that. They don't even know when Job was written. So how do we know that? But anyway, that brings us to an end of chapter 40. Oh, look at that. We have 41 and 42 to go. Okay, we're going to have to stop though. Does anyone have any comments? Or questions? Okay. Well, next week, I'm not going to be here. But when I get back, the next week, we're going to finish 2 chapters, and then we're going to move into something else. I don't know what we're going to do. Maybe question and answer, maybe ask. If you have any ideas, let me know. Thank you for the comments.